Hey everyone, my name's Dom and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a spoiler-free review of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So if you haven't already done so, give the like and subscribe buttons a little tickle, and now let's go and hear what I've got to say about this fantasy classic. So Assassin's Apprentice was released in 1995. It wasn't a debut novel as such, it was the first novel that was released under the name Robin Hobb, but the author had previously released titles under the name Megan Lindholm as well, and continues to release under both names actually until this day. Assassin's Apprentice itself is the first in the Farseer trilogy, which is the opening series, if you like, of the wider realm of the Elderlings series as well. So if you like the book, it does give you quite a bit to get your teeth into. I think it's 3 trilogies, a quartet, and then there's some additional accompanying sort of short stories as well, all set in this world. Assassin's Apprentice itself is kind of autobiographical. It's told in the first person, and it's the early life story, I guess, of our main character, Fitz Chivalry Farseer. He's the illegitimate son of the king-in-waiting, a chap called Prince Chivalry. So we start off the book with Fitz as a 6-year-old. He's living with his mother, and his maternal grandfather has had enough basically, so he takes him to a garrison where Prince Chivalry's men are, and basically hands over this young boy and says, "He's your problem now, I'm not going to feed or clothe him anymore." So Fitz is taken to Buckkeep, which is the castle where the king and his sons live. However, we don't get to see his father because Prince Chivalry, essentially because it comes out that he has an illegitimate son, he abdicates his position as king-in-waiting and moves away, essentially, and Fitz never meets him. Instead, he's essentially raised for those early years by Prince Chivalry's right-hand man, a stableman called Burrich, and he basically brings him up almost as, in a sense, as his own son. As Fitz gets older, the king takes him on and makes him essentially a king's man, someone who's loyal to the throne and works specifically on behalf of the king. To that end, he's handed over to an old master by the name of Chade, who is the king's essentially assassin, and Chade trains Fitz up in those arts to, I guess, take over when Chade himself is unable to do the job anymore. So Fitz becomes the Royal Assassin, which I think is the title of the next book, or one of the next books in the series, and he goes off eventually on missions to do the king's bidding, whether that's to kill somebody or to find information. It's kind of a wider job than just the title assassin would generally denote. So we start to see Fitz go out on various missions and see a bit more of the world, and then towards the end of the book he gets really heavily involved in some political scheming, which really changes the tone, I think, of the book, from a bit of a meandering look at the early years, skipping a couple of years here and there as Fitz is grown up, to what we see at the end is a bit kind of high octane, fast pace, as he's going around trying to get to the bottom of this plot and stop certain things from happening. So that's a bit of a loose look at the plot of the book. Let's go and have a look at the characters and what I thought of it overall. So Fitz himself, I think, is quite likeable. Although he starts off as a 6-year-old, we're listening to the story essentially. He's telling it as an old man recounting his early years. So he has a good memory of those times. It is said in the books that he's kind of older than his years, so he does kind of know a lot more than he probably would as a 6-year-old, and he takes a lot more in. He's very quiet. I guess that's part of the whole being uprooted and put into this strange new environment. He kind of keeps to himself a lot, but within that he's always looking and learning and taking things in as well. He's someone who's got a quite a defined, quite a good moral compass. He definitely has a view at least on what is right and what is wrong, and he feels bad when he's asked to do something that falls on the wrong side of that, or when he realizes for himself that to get something done, to do the right thing, he has to do something that's maybe not quite as good. He's a very loyal person, and he's I guess quick to judge. He has ability that helps him to judge, which makes him quite trusting quite early on for the right person. So as far as that ability goes, Fitz has something which is called the wit, which is kind of a magical power, predominantly really to allow him to bond with animals. So where he spends his early years growing up, essentially in the stables, he's got the royal hounds, for instance. He's got horses, but he kind of focuses on the dogs, and he has a close bond with certain dogs that he spends a lot of time with, basically. This gives him a lot of kind of learning, I guess. You not only see the world through his eyes, but you also kind of get introduced to the senses of what the dog is seeing as well. That Fitz is able to actually learn for himself through this bond. So it's quite interesting in that sense. To a limited degree, this also allows him to do something similar with other humans. He doesn't bond with them, but he can kind of sense how they're feeling more than a normal person would be, and sometimes to sense whether there's somebody around or not. So I guess going into a profession as an assassin, that's going to be really helpful for him as he grows older and grows into the work as well. The other characters I think are actually really good. There's obviously some bad characters, but they're all written well, and you can see the motives and what they're trying to achieve and why they're trying to achieve it, and kind of the way that they look at things. So I don't think actually that there's any characters that I didn't like, any characters that came across as not done well enough, or anything along those lines. And I think that's quite rare, because normally there's at least one or two characters who you just think, no, they just don't seem very well fleshed out, or I just didn't like that one. All of the characters here were actually pretty good. The main ones that we see outside of Fitz, he's got a couple of young friends that he meets in town. He's got the stableman Burrick. There's some of the other royals. So you've got King Shrewd, Prince Verity, and Prince Regal. You can see by the names they're a little bit weird. That is explained at the start of the book, that the royals are given names at birth that the parents kind of want them to grow into. Chivalry, obviously, that's the reason that he sort of abdicated, because it kind of went against his chivalrous nature, or the perceived nature of chivalry himself. So you see the royals, and they're all very different. It's not just kind of a pigeonhole royal here. We specifically see more of Verity than the others, and the relationship that Fitz develops with him almost as kind of a second father figure, to replace Verity's brother, Chivalry, who is not able to be Fitz's father figure. And then we see some of the masters. So you've got Chade training Fitz to be the assassin, and not only that, but teaching him kind of the way of the world a little bit, which is going to really help him when he's out there doing his job. You see Galen, who is another master who's teaching him the skill, which we'll look at in the world building bit in a moment. And some of the other people who are training him, some of the other sort of dignitaries and royals from other countries, they're all of the ones that we actually see enough of are actually quite well rounded for what we do see of them. There's no one who's just left as, here's a person and we're not going to paint them, we're just going to see them as this very rough sketch. So I was really impressed with the character work that was done in this opening book of the series. Now, in terms of the world, I kind of picture it almost as an outline of a world without being painted in. Now, that's not a criticism, although it might sound like it, because for me, this allows us to see the parts that we need to see. So we see Buckkeep, the castle, and the town around it. We see the various bits of the world that Fitz travels through, and a couple of places where he does some of his missions. But we don't really see much more than that. We hear little snippets of news, for instance, without actually getting a lot of flesh to that part of the world. But for my mind, what that allows is future books to build on that without being constricted by what's gone before. So I'm really looking to see how the world kind of expands and how we get to see more of it, essentially as Fitz sees more of it. So I think that's actually well done, even though it sounds like a criticism and as if I'm saying that the world isn't very well fleshed out. That's definitely not the way that I mean it. So I said earlier that we have the wit, which allows Fitz to communicate and to bond with animals. So this other magic that we have in the world is the skill. This is predominantly restricted to the kind of the royal family and the nobles. It's a bit like the wit. I see them as being very closely related. It's just that this one is more for people. So instead of being able to bond with animals, this one's more for communication over vast distances. You can pass information on, or you can pass orders on, for instance, to someone who's out, many miles away. So the other element of the skill is if you are strong enough in the skill, you can have almost a power of persuasion over people. You can kind of get into their heads and make them see things that aren't there or not see things that are there. You can change their perception of what they know and what they are seeing. So as an example, you've got these raiders who are attacking the coastal settlements of the six duchies. And you've got someone who's powerful in the skill who's trying to stop them. So the way he'll do this is to get into the heads of the lookouts on these ships, and there's a storm coming, and he'll make them kind of not see this storm. So the ship will get into the storm before it's too late to get away from it, essentially. Or the other way he'll manage it is the ships will pass landmarks, and the lookouts will kind of look straight past them. They won't actually see what's there in front of them, so the ship will end up miles off course, thinking that it's yet to get to kind of a specific point, whereas it's actually gone straight past it. So this is quite interesting, and it opens up quite a lot of possibilities, which I'm sure will be explored later on in the series in future books. So in terms of the book overall, I really enjoyed it as one volume, taking in all of its parts. There were bits that I didn't like quite as much. I thought the start of the book was almost a little bit pedestrian in pace. We're dealing with sort of those younger years of the life of Fitz, and he's growing up, skipping a couple of years here and there because, I mean, we don't need to know everything they did through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, for instance. Towards the end, where we start to get involved in some of the plotting, it really ramps up the pace. Things start to get a little bit tense. But I think that although this was my favourite part of the book, it was all kind of squashed into the last, 2 or 3 chapters. So you had this kind of slow pace, keeping your interest. You're not thinking about putting the book down because it's not going anywhere, but it's just ambling along kind of quite nicely. And then all of a sudden, bam, it hits you, and the stakes are suddenly so much higher, and it's a lot more of an exciting feel to the book. I see it as a sort of a total tonal shift at the end of the book. It's almost like a completely different book in those last few chapters. So I really liked that part of it, and I would have liked to have seen more of the book like that. This last particular piece, this part of the storyline, I don't think you could have really stretched it out because it would have lost kind of what it was if you were to do that. So it was right to have it condensed into that short spot, but I'd have just liked to see more like that, and hopefully in future books that's more where we're going to be. Obviously Fitz is older now, he's more of a young man than a child, so I guess really in the world that we're looking at, you get more opportunity for those kind of dastardly plots and schemes to occur. Another thing that I thought was a little bit weird, and this is just a personal thing really, is the name of our main character. So his full name, it's only mentioned once or twice in the book, but his full name is Fitz Chivalry Farseer. And essentially, what that means, if you look at the etymology of the name, is son of chivalry, which is exactly what Fitz is. So Fitz, in our world, the word Fitz or the name Fitz is kind of used as son of. So you see various names like Fitzpatrick, Fitzgerald, and that means son of Patrick, son of Gerald. There's an element as well where it's been used in history to by nobles to acknowledge an illegitimate son. So you'll have, for instance, Fitz Clarence as the son of the Duke of Clarence, Fitzroy, son of the king, who was illegitimate son of King Charles II. So you've got kind of that element, and that's kind of where we are here. And I imagine that's, whether it's intentional or not, I imagine that's kind of why Fitz is called Fitz or Fitz Chivalry. But it kind of seems weird to me knowing that at the same time, because I'm seeing him going around and people are calling him, hey, son of. And it just kind of, it's a little bit strange to my ear. Of those elements that I didn't really like, I think there's far more that I did like. So I've said I really like the end of the book. I've said I really like the characters. The way the world building is done just enough for what we see in the book, and the way the magic is explained as, again, kind of just what we need for this book. It gives both of those a lot of room for expansion as the series goes on. So I think as an opening book to a series, especially as the kind of expanded series, The Realm of the Elderlings, instead of just the Farseer trilogy in Exclusion, I think it's really good. It gives a lot of opportunity, it gives a lot of promise, it sets things up, I think, quite nicely, both in terms of the storyline and the kind of the general world building element as well. So I really enjoyed it overall, especially the last portion of the book. I feel it was maybe a kind of a solid 3-star book, but just that really really intense ending that I really enjoyed bumped up the overall feel to, I'd say, a 3.5 stars out of 5. So a really solid first entry for this series, and I'm looking forward to reading more of them in the future as well. But in terms of Assassin's Apprentice, it's not a new book, so there's loads of people who've already read it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of it, whether you agree or disagree with the things I've said, or if there's additional things that you've picked up that you'd like to discuss a little bit further. So that's it from today. I hope you enjoyed this quick review, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one. In the meantime, take care, read some good books, and I'll see you later. Bye.